Well, hello, everybody. It's 2 o'clock on Thursday, September 3rd, and it's time for the COPEC Daily Financial Wellness Webcast. Today, we got a great program. Really excited to have Nate again with us. Nate Quilter, who's a certified financial planner with retirement strategies. And we're going to talk a little bit today about goal planning, legacy planning, and really kind of bring that to the forefront of some of our planning discussions. So wanted to go ahead and spend just a few minutes, as everybody knows, to go ahead and kick this off with some disclosures. So if you can take a second and review that, you can also either take a screenshot or go to the COPEC website, and down at the bottom of the COPEC website under disclosure, we have that there as well. So excited to have everybody, and take a minute to look at that, and we'll get going here. So for those that don't know already, COPEC is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that does community education without any cost marketing to the community. This is a great opportunity for us to bring these experts locally to you and provide some insight and expertise so that you can learn a little bit more about certain areas before you research those deeper or make any moves that you might need to make. So we're happy to be part of that process for you. We have a new COPEC. This is actually about 4 or 5 years old. As far as the financial wellness initiative, we've been working really hard at making sure that this information is available to you, and not just education, but then also resources like these programs here today, which is daily, every day at 2 o'clock. Also on Fridays, we have a lecture series that is available for you to listen to, in addition to our retirement decisions, which is a in-person typically, but obviously this year we're doing webinar. Retirement decisions is preparation for retirement, and those, along with our availability to you and your company or your department on an as-needed basis. So programming, obviously, or technology, if we have any problems, just hold tight. We'll make sure we try to fix that as soon as possible. If you have questions, go ahead and put that in the chat or the question box, and we'll make sure that we try to get that into our discussion. If we run out of time, we are going to stay on as long as needed between 2:30 and 3 o'clock to answer any additional questions that you may have. And holidays, just know that if we have a holiday, we won't be doing those programs, as well as the day before or the day after, like Thanksgiving or Christmas, things like that. And please share this with others. We appreciate the opportunity to share this information, and anything we can do to help people you might know, or groups, or employees, or whatever. To turn off my phone here real quick. So appreciate the opportunity. If you're happy to share that, we appreciate that. As far as the wellness portal as part of this initiative, when you go into COPEC, either under the tabs at the top or the button on the first page, just go into the financial wellness portal, and there you'll see 6 tiles. The first tile on the top left is what we're doing today, the daily show, and the orange buttons below gives you an outlook of calendar of topics that you can look at and put on your calendar if things really interest you and you want to listen more on it. This is an example of what those calendars may look like. And so you can see today, we're over here under the 3rd for planning with Nate Quilter, goal set planning, or goal planning. And, we'll take a look at those, and those are going to be updated, like I said, 3 to 6 months out, so you can get a good idea. In the middle top, this is the retirement decisions workshops. These are happening 2 or 3 times a year, and there's no cost. We do need some registration for these, though, so we know how best to set these up, typically for the in-person, faucet center, libraries, things of that nature. So please take a look at those. Those are coming up here in about 2 weeks on September 17th. Awesome programs to review if you're looking to retire in the next 10 to 15 years, what to look at, how to deal with state, STRS, PRS pensions, private pensions, Social Security, Medicare, transitioning, the financial independence analysis, just really covers a great broad spectrum for you to really get an insight. And those are typically about an hour and a half long. And then Financial Wellness Fridays, we hear on Financial Wellness Fridays, you can see this coming on the 4th, tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We're going to have estate planning essentials. And Russ Gollin, our elder law attorney, will be helping us with that information. And so take a look at that schedule. That's going to be changing, or going out 2 or 3 months in advance as well. And there's no requirement to register for these. You can just tune in anytime. And then down on the bottom left there, if you are part of a department, part of a company that really does education outreach to your employees' wellness, whatever it might be, if you'd like to set up any of these programs specifically to your audience, just let us know. We can set those up. We do these. Like I said, we've been doing this since 2004. And we've done it with a lot of organizations, companies around town. And so, again, there's no cost to do these. There's no marketing. Right now, obviously, web-based is probably the most demand. In person, we've been putting that on hold for quite a while. But just send us a note. We're happy to set those up for you. And then lastly, if you have a personal need, question, concern, something that is not being discussed, or we can't really get into that here under a group setting, just send us a note, open up a calendar invite. We'll go ahead and help you out any way we can. Again, in this, like everything else, it's a resource. There's no pressure to do anything, no cost to you at all. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and introduce. I see, Nate, you're on here. Appreciate you joining us again, as always. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about goal planning, I guess. You want to give us a little review, maybe as far as, what we're going to talk about and what you're really meaning by legacy planning.
Great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate everybody's time today. Legacy planning is really, planning for your legacy, but people think, what happens after you pass away, or even in the lead up to that. When people think of you 50 years from now, what they think of is kind of what I think of when it comes to legacy. So there's, a lot of aspects of it. And actually, it's a good lead in with Russ presenting tomorrow with the estate planning essentials. But, any talk on legacy planning wouldn't be complete if you didn't discuss the estate planning documents. But also, directing things to go where you want to go, how you can do it, what issues might come up, some strategies as far as, what to put towards this or that or the other. But it all really, as a financial planner, who really spends a lot of time doing that planning, for me, it all ties back to your plan, your overall picture and how that fits in. So.
Well, great. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I think the first step is maybe the review of the estate planning documents. So you want to maybe kind of bring that into the picture a little bit and how that would apply.
The estate planning documents, there are a lot of them out there, obviously, and the will is the kind of foundation of it. It directs where things go. If you have children, it's, hey, this is who I want to be the guardian of those children. So it's a very important document, even if, I think everybody over the age of 18 should have one. It may be something that you change over time, but it's important to have that as part of your, legacy planning. There are other things that may come into play. Trusts, there may be a situation where a trust would be beneficial for you, or the better situation. A lot of times it comes with a higher cost, but a lot of times you can't have everything happen the way you want it to happen without a trust. So that could come into play. But your healthcare directives, those are very important. It's saying your wishes, what you want to happen. Do I want to be buried, or do I want to be cremated? My big joke with my wife, she's my healthcare power of attorney, and it's, hey, if it's ever, hey, do you want to keep the leg, but he's going to be in pain for his entire life, or should we cut it off or leave it? I'd rather be in pain my entire life, but be able to go on hikes. Being able to express those things, while you still have the capacity to, it's important to have those conversations beforehand.
And I think that brings up a really good conversation as far as why it's critical to have dialogue between not just your attorney or your planner, but actually having all three, included in this discussion, because unfortunately too many times your conversation with the attorney might be in a perspective that you don't tie it into the planning, but it's in a certain thing. And so things are written a certain way. And then when you're talking to your planner, you want that to be applied the exact same way that dialogue. And unfortunately, too many times you have an interesting dynamic where sometimes people go to an attorney and just get a will done, but they don't talk about it enough to really get into the depth of what they truly want the documents to do. And same thing with a planner. Sometimes they have an investment manager, but not a thorough planner. So you might have something simple, but not a thorough discussion. If you have a thorough discussion with an estate and a thorough discussion with your planner, you want those to be, synonymous with each other or to match up and be parallel.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, what's the point of doing it unless it's going to go through, with what you want done? So, kind of as an example, I know we talked about it a little before, but if my will says that my wife gets everything, but when I signed up for my 401k 15 years ago, I was dating somebody else and I put them as beneficiaries, it doesn't matter what my will says, it's who the beneficiary on that account is. So that's something that, whoever's your advisor is or whoever's running that plan, or if you're just doing it yourself, make sure you know that those beneficiaries match what the estate planning documents say. And the same as, if you're working with an accountant, make sure that you understand the tax implications of the different things that you may want to work out in your legacy planning. So you're the leader of them. They're the accountant, the attorney, the financial advisors. They're your team. They're there for you. So you feel free to have them talk amongst themselves. They might have you make sure you sign a document saying it's okay to give permission, but talk to each of them about the discussions you had with the other one and make sure they're all working, together.
Jerry Snyder does a program about being organized and how to do, where you should keep things and which documents. And it's a really good overall program that he does for COPEC and the outreach. But I know this has a lot this applies a lot to the planning side of it as well. You want to tell us a little bit of, as far as, the being organized, making sure that your wishes are known, and maybe just elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, being organized is very important. I mean, what good is it to have estate planning documents if people can't find them? So you want, at least your executor, to know where things are. Whoever your power of attorney is or your healthcare power of attorney, make sure they have copies of those documents that they can produce, because a financial power of attorney is somebody that can step in and pay your bills for you if you're incapacitated. Well, if they can't prove to people that they're your power of attorney, it's not going to do them any good. Same as the healthcare power of attorney. They need to be able to access those documents to show them to the hospital. So a lot of times it's good to have them electronically available. So, if you're traveling, they can get to it, very quickly. But in general, just make sure that the people who need them know where they are, have access to them, or have copies of them they can show people in order to make things happen, quickly and the way you want them to go. So, organizing it, and, a lot of it too, in this day and age with electronic, make sure that's set up. Passwords, to get into certain things that, that they'll be able to access electronically. Make sure that people have a way to know where to find that information, because it can just be an added burden to them. You're asking them to do you a favor by doing this for you. Let's say an executor, for example. You're asking them a favor. It's a lot of work to be an executor for somebody a lot of times of their will. So make sure you make it as easy on them as you can. Do what you can to make it easy on them. So that's where that, making your wishes known. You don't want them to have to decide, oh, we don't know what he wanted us to do with the body after they pass away. So, those are all important as far as, the documents and the estate planning goes. But as far as moving into your overall planning, kind of the same thing. What are my wishes for, where do I want these accounts to go? Sometimes it's as easy as a beneficiary, but sometimes you're setting, hey, I've got this one child who I think is going to blow through all the money that they inherited, but this other one's responsible. maybe we need to set up a trust to protect that one child from, kind of blowing through everything in a very short period of time instead of them being set up for life. So a lot of it's an organizational, and making your wishes known is having it all in one place. And it's okay, we'll talk to children of somebody, if they have hey, this is what we want to happen. We want the kids to be on board, and it's good to tell them in advance, or the grandkids, whatever it may be, so they're prepared for what's coming to an extent. So a lot of times have them talk to your advisor or your, estate planning attorney, so that they're on board and they hear those wishes while you're still there, to be able to express it, and that they're set up for success moving down the road.
Yeah, and so let's talk about the planning side of this, really. I mean, at the end of the day, most of our financial planning is built around the idea about becoming financially independent and have a sound plan, but really clarity as far as the long-term resources and income, inflation, expenses, all that stuff, to manage our life, to be there for us when we not only retire, but towards those last years of our life. And a lot of times during this planning process, it's really more about making sure there's enough money for us. But two areas that I find is, okay, do you want to leave any money to the children when you're gone? They get whatever's left over. Or do you want to be purposeful about it? Or do you want to actually provide some guidance, financial guidance, support to them while you're alive, so you might have it be part of your plan and part of your expense. Some people, they really want to have some asset left over, and you got to be purposeful if that's the goal. But I know that's a big issue with a lot of clients, but it's many times not focused on, clear enough during that process. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And that's, a lot of times, some of the biggest goals we see, we talked about a little bit last week too, helping out family. And I consider legacy not just after you pass away, but, your legacy is, hey, I want the grandkids to get a college education. I want to be able to fund it when they need it, not them get it when I pass away. Or same thing is, it could be for, your children. I want them to be able to buy that home. I'd rather see them enjoy it while I'm alive than them get a big chunk when I'm dead, which may be when they're retired, for all we know, and they're in good shape at that point. So I tie everything back to the overall big picture. And some of the biggest goals we see are helping out family members. So you want to make sure that setup that you have is something that you can sustain. And it's great to have money left over at the end, and they still get something then, because you need to make sure that you have enough to get you that long. But, again, part of that legacy, I think, is along the way, helping out family or loved ones or charities, whatever it may be. And you want to make sure that what you're giving isn't too much to meet your own needs. But again, let them enjoy it while you can see it a lot of times as well.
Is there when you're dealing with planning and when you're dealing with the tax implications, is there certain accounts that are better than others that might, be able to be utilized for this gifting type of a, strategy?
Definitely. Yes, absolutely. And it works, everybody's situation, everybody's goals are going to work a little bit differently. But just as an example, there were the Secure Act that passed at the end of 2019 is now in effect. If you were to pass away in 2020 and you have a beneficiary other than your spouse, and it's a retirement account, like a Roth or an IRA, it has to be emptied out within 10 years. It can be all in the first year, it can be all in the 10th year, or it can be part, a little bit along the way, really however they want to, but it has to be taken out in 10 years. So the type of accounts might be very important here. If it's a Roth IRA, there aren't going to be any tax consequences of them taking that money out of the Roth IRA if let's say your child gets it, or your grandchild, whatever it may be. yes, they have to empty it out, but they don't have to pay taxes as they're taking it out. Whereas if it's an IRA, then a pre-tax IRA or a 401k as an example, it has to be emptied out in 10 years, and every dollar they take out, they pay tax on. Well, if they're in a relatively high earning years of their lifetime, they have to empty this out over that 10-year time frame, there could be tax impact of it. So, then if you also have, let's say, a charity in your, well, hey, the charities don't pay the taxes, so have the IRA go to them, have the Roth go to your child, and that, so that those are some strategies you can do. Another thing would be, like, for example, if you have stocks or, after-tax investments that have appreciated over the years, and they're worth a lot more now than they were when you purchased them. If you were to sell them and give the cash to your child or your, whoever it may be, you have to pay tax on the gain before you give that away, to give the cash away. Whereas if you pass away with that item, there could be a step up in basis where the basis or the amount put in now steps up to the amount of the date of death valuation. So if you have stock of company ABC and you paid $10 for it 50 years ago and it's now worth $10,000, if you sell it, you pay capital gains taxes on the $990,000 in order to give it away. If you instead pass away with that item, now the basis for the next person is $10,000. They could sell it the next day if it's still worth $10,000 and not pay a dime in taxes. So maybe holding that, there are some items you might be better off holding until the date of death instead of getting it to them earlier. So it all depends on what the goal is. Different accounts may work better for reaching that, those legacy wishes.
Bottom line is, if you're strategic, if your goal is to leave money, your goal is to give money, if you're strategic about it, you can save a lot of money in taxes, either through your own tax bracket or your beneficiaries at death or at giving, whatever it might be. If you're strategic about it and you use the right accounts and you marry that with the plan, you can save a lot of money in taxes if you think about it ahead of time.
Absolutely. And saving money in taxes is the same thing as giving more to those people, really,
Yeah.
Whether it's you paying or them paying it, there's more, a larger piece of the pie for them later to use for their own wishes and maybe their legacies down the line. So, and I do see that a lot, a lot of clients who work with that inherit money, they want to then pass that on to their children or a good portion of it, to kind of keep that, passing forward going. So, it's, the more you can move along without paying the taxes on, the less you pay in taxes, the more you can keep passing down from generation to generation, possibly. And even if not, if it's all going to end in the next generation, who cares? Let's let them get as much as we can. And, hey, I love having the infrastructure and things we have that, what we have in our country. But part of planning is, trying to minimize taxes to, have more for yourself or your loved ones.
Yeah, and there's a lot of scenarios where you want to be taxed today rather than have it still deferred. If you're already in a low bracket today as a retiree and your kids are all in a high tax bracket, you may want to have it forced out in your name so that they don't have to deal with it, as opposed to everybody thinks either they don't think about it or they always think about how they can get it to them, with as little tax to the person giving the money. But the reality is sometimes you want to wash it out, similar to the benefit of doing a Roth IRA and pay taxes today versus deferral. It all depends on where you think people are going to pay taxes and how long it might be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the Roth is a great example. If we have retirees that we work with that say, look, you're able to take out X amount of dollars a year before you pay any taxes. And then even if you do, you're at a really low bracket. If your children are at a much, considerably higher bracket, then they get it. If you don't pay taxes on it, they're going to get something that they have to take out and pay taxes on in 10 years. Whereas if you do go ahead and pay that tax at that lower rate, they can take it out and not have to worry about that. And a lot of times we'll say, hey, look, even though they have to empty it in 10 years, they can empty it and use that money to fund their own retirement accounts, in which case they're extending it for their lifetime. So even though they have to have it out of that account in 10 years, they can there are ways to effectively shift it over so it can be deferred for their lifetime, if they just shifted over to their own retirement assets. So absolutely, there are a lot of different strategies, and again, every situation is a little bit different. So you kind of, what are your goals? What are the, the tax implications on your end? What would it be down there? And kind of marry those all together and work with your accountant and your advisor and your attorney to make sure that everything's working and together.
Nate, we've got a couple minutes left here, and I have a couple questions that have come in. And so I wanted to kind of get those out and see if we could, kind of answer those here in the last few minutes that we have. The first is, how would you recommend informing your family about what your goals are for, for giving or estate or whatever it might be? How do you recommend they go about doing that? And I know obviously there's 100 different ways, but do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a great question. And a lot of times, I think it's just kind of keep them informed, number one, on what may be going on. Now, obviously, a lot of times you don't know what that amount is going to be. You may be 75 years old and think you're going to have a lot, but then what happens if a long-term care event happens? So depending, you may want to approach the subject not with hard numbers, just to, hey, if things happen, this is what, I want you to be prepared that this, and this. So a lot of times it's just family dinners or, a beer around the fireplace, whatever it may be, just to have a general discussion. There are some ways that you may need to set things up. What you tell them you want to happen doesn't mean they necessarily need to do it. So if I leave money, a bunch of money to my son, but he's got creditors coming after him, they could take that money if it's not protected in some way. So, you both kind of need to know each other's situation when making those decisions and having those discussions. But, maybe you need to set up your estate planning a different way to make sure that creditors can't take that from them. So, there are all different ways you can talk to them about it. Whereas, if you're talking about a significant amount, and hey, even if I have a 10-year long-term care event, the money's there's going to be at least this amount for
right.
whoever it is. You may want to get them involved with your advisor and say, hey, look, maybe we open up a small account now just so you get used to working with them, or have the discussion with them of, they've talked to me about it, because a lot of times the conversation's hard. There are times where we'll see maybe it's unequal to the two kids. Let's, as an example, maybe I have two children, and the one I've given a lot of money over the last 20 years or 10 years, whatever it may be, and the other one has been self-sufficient, and I've never had to give them a dime. Well, maybe I want them to be taken care of a little more to set it up for their grandchildren, because or their children, excuse me. Whereas the other one, look, I've taken care of you during life. You're not going to get as much at death. And that can be a tough conversation. Maybe, you don't want them to be mad afterward. You're better off to have that conversation with them beforehand and understand, hey, this is why I'm doing it, because this, and this. Just so there aren't any hard feelings later on due to it.
Right.
So, and again, it could just be, hey, sitting around the dinner table when you have that conversation, or it may be better to be doing it with an accountant or an attorney or an advisor. But it's always best to have that conversation. And, again, if you think there's going to be a significant amount and you're worried about how they might handle it, maybe you do need to do another, a trust instead of just them getting it as is. Or maybe, you need to get them working with an advisor that they trust, that will help them explain things when things happen.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a really good point there, which is when you have an unequal distribution, you might want to explain that ahead of time, that maybe you provided additional, financial support to one of your children, and instead of it being a surprise later that you adjusted or you didn't adjust, maybe you're on the side where I gave that, but I still left the will at 50-50 or whatever it might be. And then also making sure that the family understands that the will and beneficiaries aren't the same thing. You could have the will at 50-50, but if the beneficiaries is mistakenly set up or whatever it is, so the more that you have the family engaged in that, the more that they understand what your intentions were and things like that. So, hey, Nate, I appreciate you being here today again, as always. If you have any, do you have any, information you'd like to wrap us up with here? And, we appreciate you being part of this program.
I appreciate everybody's time, and thank you for having me. I guess the thing I would add is, if this interests you a lot, Russ's discussion on the estate documents tomorrow actually will probably go into a lot of detail on those estate documents and offer a little more clarity on, the trusts, the wills, beneficiaries, things like that. So if you want to learn more about it, obviously, there are ways to reach out to us directly, but that's a great start, is actually to listen to Russ's tomorrow, because those estate planning documents, like I said, I think anybody over age 18 should have it. And it's really no point in talking about legacy planning unless you've got those in place. So that's a great way to start.
Great. Hey, thank you so much for being here with us today. Tomorrow, actually, I think I failed to check and see what tomorrow's program is. Let me look here. That's going to be actually... it looks like Russ is going to be doing double duty. So he's doing a lecture at 11, then he'll be joining me at 2 o'clock for further discussion. So have a great afternoon, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll be talking to everybody soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, everybody.